In this video, we're going to be talking about investment, and we're going to be using simple interest once again. So in the last video, we talked about how you would have to repay the bank with extra interest if you actually borrowed money from the bank to buy something you need right now. And in this case, we're actually going to do the opposite. Say you're investing in the bank, so basically you're putting $2,500 in a savings account at some interest rate of 8% per annum. So per annum essentially means per year. So that means that you're only going to be charged 8% for each year that you keep that. You're not going to be charged, but you're going to earn 8% of that original amount for every year that you keep that money in the savings account. So the main point of how a bank operates, and I think this is important to explain now because a lot of people are a bit confused as to how banks make their money. I mean, banks make a lot of money, and the way they do this is as follows. A person puts money into a savings account that belongs to the bank. Now, the bank promises you to pay you a certain amount of interest. Now, that interest is always going to be quite small. So it could be something like 3% per annum or 4% per annum. And it varies a little bit depending on which bank you choose. Now, what's going to happen is, okay, so you might think, well, I'm putting this money into the bank. That money is still mine. And the bank is going to give me free money because it's going to pay me interest for the act of keeping that money in the bank. But what is actually happening is that money that you put into the savings account is actually being lended. So it's actually other customers from this bank are borrowing from that bank's money. So not necessarily from your account, but from everyone else's account in that bank. And if they need money, for example, maybe this guy needs to buy a new motorcycle, this guy needs some books, and this person needs to buy new clothes or something like that. So they all take loans using their credit cards or something similar to buy those things. And they're going to have to repay the bank with some interest. But now the selling point of this whole cycle is that they're going to be paying more interest to the bank than the bank promises to pay you just for keeping the money there. So even though this money is technically being borrowed by a lot of different customers that you will never find out who they are, technically you still have access to this amount of money at any point. So if, for example, this money was borrowed by 3 different people at any point in time, but you needed to actually go to the bank and say, hey, I need to actually retrieve that money because I need to pay for this particular thing. What the bank would do is it would actually borrow from other people's accounts in the same bank, and then it would give you that money right away. But then once you put it back, it would essentially just pay it. So it's an endless cycle, and the bank is always going to get a profit from this because they're obviously going to charge a higher interest from borrowing money than they're actually going to pay their customers for keeping money into the account. But I guess in the end, it benefits everyone because at least you're going to be getting some interest earned from that, and other people will have access to basically money that they can borrow, so that will allow them to buy the things that they need at any point in time. But be careful with this idea because very ugly things can happen if this is not managed properly. Okay, so back to the problem. You invest $2,500 at 8% per annum and you produce $50 of interest. Now the question is, how long did you invest that for? So obviously we're given the interest, we're given the rate and the principal amount, so we want to find out the number of periods that we actually kept that money into the bank. So we know the simple interest formula is going to be PRN. We know P, that's going to be $2,500. We know R, that's going to be 8% per annum, and we're going to convert that to decimal, so that's going to be 0.08. Now the number of periods or the amount of time, we don't actually know that, so that's what we need to actually find out from that equation. We do know, however, the amount of interest earned, so that was $50. So all we need to do now is just rearrange this equation to find n. So in this case, we can have n equals to I divided by P times R. And now we just plug in the numbers here. So we have $50 at the top. We have principal amount, that's $2,500. And we have our interest rate of 0.08. And we're going to plug that into a calculator to find out how much exactly, how much time passed for us to accumulate that amount of interest. And then this is going to come down to 1/4, or simply 0.25. Now the units for this is important, so we need to look at here. This is the amount, the rate per annum, so that means that's per year. So basically what we're saying is that it took 1/4 of a year to accumulate this amount of interest. So basically 1/4 of a year, if we have 12 months in a year, then 1/4 of that is just going to be 3 months. So what we can conclude from this is that the number of periods that passed was 3 months. So that's not too bad. Actually, you got a pretty good deal. With just keeping that money in the bank for 3 months, you earned $50 extra. Of course, it's not a huge amount of money, but I guess it's better than just having all that money in your own bedroom or something like that and really not be doing anything with it. So I guess at some point you're just going to have to consider whether you have to open a savings account and just keep all your money in there. And perhaps you could get better deals than this, but in general, this is more or less how banks operate and how different people can get access to money that they can borrow in order to buy things they need.